We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. This episode is brought to you by Picta's brand new photo organization community, aptly titled Photo Declutter Community. Picta is a photo printing service who wants to make sure you have room for the memories you truly love by decluttering the rest. I couldn't love that more. They created a free Facebook group that already has 250 members who are ready to clear out their photo mess and organize their pictures to create lasting projects, albums, and organized memories. This Facebook group will help you free up space on your devices so you can continue documenting your memories without worrying that you won't have room. And they offer weekly challenges with prizes and tons of support to make sure that organizing your pictures is actually fun. If you've listened to episode 24 of this podcast called Decluttering Photos on Your Phone and in Your Home, you know how much I struggle with photo clutter. So this group is for people like you and me who are tired of duplicates, blurry pics, and screenshots clogging up our phones or old 4x6s floating around in the house without meaning. Join this community for free by searching the Photo Decluttering Community on Facebook. And when you join, you'll get 40% off site-wide for Picta's photo printing services by stating that you learned about the group from the Paring Down podcast. You can also get the direct link to join in the show notes of this episode. Speaking of episodes, let's dive into the one I have for you today. Hey guys, I need to start by saying apologies ahead of time if I don't sound entirely like myself. I had no voice this whole week, and it's just coming back from, some little cold or whatever. I mean, full disclosure, I'm the worst when I am sick. You know how people call it the man cold? Because a lot of men, they can't function very well with even the slightest inconvenience to their health. I am embarrassed to admit this, but I feel like for the sake of authenticity, I need to tell you that I, in the Leyko household, am the man cold holder. I cannot function when I don't feel good. Luckily, my job, besides the podcast, I work part-time for another creator on their social media team. I just have to sit on the couch and work from there. So I was able to work this week, but really anything else, I was checked way out. My children probably watched more TV than they should after school, but listen, I couldn't I couldn't actively break apart their fights. I started clapping my hands at one point because they were wrestling and, hurting each other as, a 3, 4, and 6-year-old do. I mean, maybe not yours. I don't know. Maybe you have really wonderfully behaved children. Please DM me your secret. But my kids try and murder each other on a regular basis. And I literally couldn't keep their little paws off each other. So I had to clap really loud once to try and get their attention because I didn't have a voice to be like, hey guys, stop, and it scared my daughter, my poor 4-year-old, so much that she started to cry. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just clapped, but it was traumatizing for her. So anyways, it's been a week. Do not take parenting advice from me. Someone might say clapping is better than raising your voice to try and get your kids to stop doing something. But my kids clearly would disagree. Not that I'm screaming at my kids. Gosh, I'm just digging myself a hole here, aren't I? Okay, on to decluttering, because Lord knows I didn't start a parenting podcast for a reason. I am way too scared of the parent scary world out there of mommy shamers. You know what I mean? Okay, moving forward. I also want to say, as we dive in today, that I am so excited to say that I signed with Cloud 10 Media. You might have seen that announcement on social media this week. Cloud 10 is a podcast network that has over 100 shows that are kind of a big deal. And I can't believe I'm part of their roster now. And they're just going to help me grow this podcast in a way that I haven't been able to do by myself, that I don't have the resources to be able to do on my own. So thank you to all of you for making this happen. It's a huge step forward for the podcast and for me on a professional level. And thank you to Cloud 10 for welcoming me to your little podcast family. It's been a very exciting week. So I just want to say thank you to all of you, because the fact that you listen is the reason that the podcast kind of keeps getting more opportunities and is growing. So yay, yay, yay. On to today's topic. So, we're talking about the guilt and fear that comes with decluttering gifts. So, someone gives you a gift, and either immediately you're like, I don't want this. Or, a couple years later or whatever, you realize it's just become clutter. So, what do we do? And I have done an episode about what to do with gifts that are clutter, and I released that a couple months ago. That's literally the name of the episode, is what to do with gifts that are clutter. But even after recording it and listening back, I was like, gosh, I feel like there's just so much more that needs to be said about that topic. And I shared that episode kind of recently because I had a reel go viral about how I personally believe we should say thank you no matter what if someone's giving us a gift, because that exchange, the gift giving exchange, is of equal importance for both people involved, right? And so I say be gracious, accept the gift, and say thank you. And of course, we'll talk about different caveats to that with boundaries and having conversations with people who do that regularly. We're going to get into all of that. But the point is, I had this reel go viral. So I shared the episode, What to Do with Gifts That Are Clutter. And at that point, I listened to it back because I was like, I don't remember what I said. And I realized that it was a lot about kid gifts and gifts that really don't hold a lot of meaning to us, that just take up space in our house, right? Like if your kids are given goodie bag gifts, if they get Christmas gifts and birthday present gifts and you just don't know what to do with it all and you feel really overwhelmed, or gifts that are given to you that make you feel the same way, but that don't hold a lot of sentimental value. I also leaned into the idea that it's more common for us to be afraid someone's going to ask where that gift is that they gave us rather than actually the act of them asking, right? Like that doesn't happen as often. But when I did a question box where I asked my audience on Instagram, like, what is the hardest part about decluttering gifts for you guys? A lot of you said that you do have people in your life who will ask where the gift is. And then the other big piece was this guilt associated with it, all those feelings of like you're being a mean or bad person or a not gracious person by decluttering the gift. So I figured today we would dive back into this idea of decluttering gifts and really approach it from these harder questions that maybe I didn't dive into in that last episode, because it does feel like there's no great answer. But that's why you guys are here. Let's dig into the hard stuff together. It doesn't mean I have all the answers, but I think I can offer some mindsets and ideas and practical steps you can take to hopefully make things a little less guilt-driven and fear-driven. That said, this episode does talk a lot about interpersonal dynamics, which really is one of the biggest hurdles to decluttering gifts. So I'm going to take it on the best that I can. But just as a reminder, I am not a psychologist or a therapist. I do have an episode of the podcast with Dr. Tracy Dalgley. She talks about what to do if your partner doesn't want to declutter. That is episode 17, if you want to go back and listen to that. But I only have an undergrad degree in psychology. That is where my official education ends. So take that for what you will. Okay, so on to the poll. I want to first start by sharing these 3 overarching themes that kept popping up in that question box answers from people on Instagram when I said, what makes decluttering gifts so hard? So the first piece was sentimentality. Most of the answers were from people who had lost a loved one and they think about the gift that was given to them or from that loved one, right? Or a family heirloom that was passed down. I think I'm going to do an entire episode about heirlooms in the future, but I do already have an episode about sentimental items where I share about going through my mom's things after she passed. So if that's the struggle that feels the hardest for you when it comes to decluttering gifts, is that sentimental piece, I would definitely recommend listening to episode 5 of this podcast that is aptly titled Sentimental Items. So then there were 2 more themes that really popped up a lot, which are the ones we're going to really dive into today. And that's the guilt and the fear related to decluttering gifts that others give you. So the first piece is internal. These are feelings that revolve mostly around your own expectations of yourself and your personal values. And then the second was an external piece, which is the input from the fear of someone asking where the gift is and what their reaction might be if you say you decluttered it. So there's that internal struggle and then the external struggle. So let me read some responses from the poll that were internally driven. And this is usually when we see the guilt showing up. So these are direct quotes from people in this community. The first person said, "It's hard not to think about the feelings I may hurt. I feel ungrateful. It feels insulting to dispose of something when someone thought of you. I don't want to be unappreciative, too picky, or too good for someone else's kindness offered as a gift. Someone sacrificed their hard earned money. Our families are not well off to get it for us. I don't want to hurt the person who gave it to me. Hard with family that visits often. Knowing someone spent their money on me." Okay, so these are all guilt driven responses. So let me read through some more externally driven fears and difficulties when it comes to decluttering gifts. And these are really those expectations from others, usually the gifter themselves. So this fear shows up. These are direct quotes again. And the question was, what makes decluttering gifts so hard? Here we go. Because family members look and ask for the gifts in my house when they come over. The gifter asks to see them the next time they're over. Because my in-laws visit often and ask where things are that they've gifted us. When you feel there is an expectation to use it, display it, etc., from the people you see often. You don't want to offend the giver, especially if they come to your house often. Other people attaching sentimental value to the items that they give or pass down to you. So I said this before about other tricky things that hold us back from decluttering, like finding the time or having a spouse that isn't on board. But there is no magical solution. I am so glad that you're here today, and we're going to talk through some ways to move forward. But please know that it is not one size fits all. At the end of the day, there's often a level of compromise or discomfort that you kind of have to accept when it comes to decluttering gifts. And life is hard. I mean, that's just the truth. Life is hard, life is uncomfortable, and there is really no way around that. But I think that accepting that life is uncomfortable is really the first step in seeing change in your life that you want to see. So let me explain. By hoping that there is an easy solution out there that you just haven't found yet, by like tuning into a podcast and being like, oh, she's going to tell me how to make decluttering gifts like seamless without any guilt and have no fear and the perfect solution for what to do if my, in-laws get mad at me, right? By hoping that there's this easy solution out there, you're really giving your anxiety and your frustration room to grow and build because we just don't see a good way out of things, right? But that's actually the key. By first accepting that there is no easy way out of things, that's when we can look around at our circumstances and start making practical choices that actually reflect reality. We're not just stuck where we are being frustrated and scared and not making any choices because there's no perfect choice, right? So really accept that there's no easy way out of things. And that's where you can start deciding what you want to do moving forward. It actually reminds me of this children's book called The Blue Ape, which is one of my kids' favorite books. The author is actually my friend's dad. His name's Bill Buffy. And anyway, it's a great book. And it's kind of about this traveler who ends up in the spooky cave that has all these different obstacles, right? So there's like a pit of snakes and a pool filled with crocodiles and these different scenarios that he has to get past. And there's no simple way out, right? Like he's in a cave. There's all walls, he can't avoid the crocodiles or the snakes. So therefore, he just took each obstacle as they came, and he got past them the best he could. And that's the visual I have in my head here is you have to accept the obstacle in front of you, okay? So things like guilt or fear of decluttering gifts are these scary scenarios. They exist. You cannot get them to just go away easily. So please first accept that there are only two choices. You either stay where you are with the stuff you don't want in your home, or you declutter it. Those are literally the only two choices when it comes to decluttering gifts. You either keep it or you declutter it. So now we're going to talk about how to declutter it kindly, of course, and maybe creative ways to deal with it that doesn't involve getting rid of it completely if that's not really an option for you. But it's just important to remember that you may not think any of these things that I talk about are going to fully solve your problem. And that's okay. And that's because solving this problem is basically impossible. You cannot declutter a gift and show it to someone who asks where it is, unless you have like a really high-tech like hologram system that you can set up before they arrive, then in which case, then you can. But realistically, for the majority of us who are not, Xenon girl of the 21st century, you cannot declutter a gift and show it to someone when they ask where it is, right? So now that we have some realistic expectations in place, let's talk about that internal piece first. We're going to start with managing the internal decluttering roadblock with the primary emotion showing up as guilt. So, this is when getting rid of gifts really rubs up against your core values. You say to yourself, I am not someone who is ungrateful. I am not someone who takes advantage of other people's money. I am not someone who hurts other people's feelings. I am not someone who thinks my tastes or my preferences are better than someone else's, right? These are your core values and your ideas of who you are as a person. So, what do we do when our core values feel like they are being tested by getting rid of a gift, but we still want to get rid of a gift? Let's start with gratitude. So you might say, my core value is I'm a grateful person. I'm not someone who is ungrateful. Therefore, getting rid of this gift feels wrong. How can you show gratitude for the gift without keeping it? Okay, some practical ideas. Have you written a thank you card? Right? You're showing gratitude. You're proving that that core value is important to you, but you don't have to keep the gift. Have you written a thank you card? Have you shown gratitude for that friendship or that relationship by calling them regularly to like check in on their lives, right? This one is really big. I find that the closer I am to someone, ironically, the less guilt I feel because I don't need that item to prove that we have a good relationship or that I'm grateful for them. I know I've shown it by being there for them, by checking in on them, by knowing what's going on in their lives. So I feel like that piece of gratitude for the relationship can really overcome some of that concern that you're not showing gratitude if you get rid of a gift. Another more practical idea that might be something you want to do is to take a picture of it, of this item you don't want to keep, and put it in a gratitude album. Because a photo album that is organized and precious to you and even displayed if you want to or easily accessed is a lot less clutter than like a whole bunch of gifts around your house. And let me explain what a gratitude album is. So this is a photo album of gifts that you don't have room for. And so on the back of the picture, you can write who gave it to you and when and why. And this can be something you flip through sometimes to experience gratitude for the people who've been thoughtful and generous to you over your life. So it's similar to keeping maybe some handwritten cards that are meaningful to you. So keep a gratitude album. And that is showing a piece of your core values of being a grateful person without necessarily keeping the item itself. Okay, next, there's this internal discord of I don't take advantage of other people, right? That's your core value. I don't take advantage of people. So let's talk through this. How do you ensure that their money isn't wasted on you? How do you ensure that by decluttering the gift, you're not taking advantage of another person? Okay, some practical ideas here. Could you afford to Venmo them $5 or $10 and say, coffee on me today because I'm thinking of you? So they won't know that this is about the gift. And obviously, it's probably not going to be a direct exchange of money. You're not like giving them money back for the gift if they bought you something more expensive than coffee. But it might relieve a bit of that internal guilt that you're experiencing that they spent their money by giving some of that back to them. So that's a little practical thing you can do that aligns with that core value that you're not taking advantage of people. Another idea, can you sell the item and buy something else you would truly love and enjoy? Again, their money wouldn't be wasted on you. Another big one is just a mindset shift. Their money isn't wasted because it encouraged you when you knew that they thought of you, right? That's the point of the gift. That's why they spent their money, is because they were thinking of you. So their why was fulfilled. Again, we're not addressing if they ask about it right now. We're just addressing that internal guilt about their money being spent. And you don't have to feel guilty because you need to know that the biggest piece that they transferred to you in the moment they gave you the gift isn't the gift itself. It's the unspoken or maybe spoken piece that says, I was thinking of you. So their money was not wasted because it encouraged you in that moment. Okay, another internal moral compass that doesn't align might be I don't hurt other people's feelings. Okay, how can we declutter a gift while still maintaining true to the fact that we don't want to hurt other people's feelings? Number one, did you receive it graciously? I briefly touched on this a little bit earlier in this podcast because of that reel that went viral where I believe saying thank you is the way to go. There are mixed camps here. One camp says you should just be honest and say no thank you if you don't want something. The other camp, which I openly reside in, is to say thank you and then declutter it later. I fall into that latter category because of this. It feels good for them to give it to you. Rejecting them in that moment that they're excited to give it to you is a bigger rejection, on a like more emotional level than decluttering the item later. Imagine how you'd feel if you picked out something for somebody and wanted to give it to them. And the moment you gave it to them, they said, I don't really need that. It's not my style. I don't really like it. No, thank you. I don't have room for it. That devastation to me would be a lot more awkward and a lot sadder and more frustrating and disappointing than if 6 months down the road, I went to their house and I just noticed I didn't see it anywhere. And even if I had the gall to ask them where it was, which is not my style at all, of course, and they said, hey, I'm so sorry. I didn't have room for it, or whatever they say, that would be way less of a blow than had they said that in the moment I gave it to them. So that's why I fall into the receive it graciously category. Now, if they are a repeat offender, so to speak, I'd have a conversation with them outside of the moment. So, not to bring up anything specific that they've gifted you in the past. I wouldn't bring up specific things, but maybe share your hopes about living with less and express a desire to receive maybe consumables or experiences moving forward, right? Like, just tell them outside of the moment that continuously receiving these gifts is becoming difficult for you and your space. So we'll get more into these types of conversations when we talk about those external pressures that makes decluttering gifts hard, about what to do when people do ask about it. We're going to get to that here soon. But ultimately, what I'm saying here is that if you don't want to hurt people's feelings, the first question you can ask yourself is, did I receive it graciously? Because if you did, you boosted their feelings in that moment already. You made them feel good already. Okay, how else can you not hurt their feelings? Again, this is from the perspective of aligning with your values. We're not talking about managing their reaction yet. Okay, so a question to ask: did you insult the gift? I'm going to assume no. Did you make fun of the gift or complain about it behind their back? Right? Those are more closely related to not hurting their feelings when it comes to living with integrity about your core values. So don't insult the gift. Don't make fun of it or complain about it, right? There you go. That's not going to be as hurtful. And then also think about this. Are you kind and encouraging to them on a regular basis? Similar to, do you show gratitude for the relationship regularly? But are you kind and encouraging to them so that this one experience doesn't outweigh your other interactions with them? So if you're afraid you're going to hurt their feelings by decluttering something and them asking about it or wondering where it is, but you don't encourage them and show kindness to them on a regular basis, then that one thing, getting rid of the gift they gave you, might really hurt their feelings. Versus, kind of like I said, if I have someone who I'm really close to, or just someone who I'm consistently rooting for and encouraging and texting, or just generally showing kindness to, if they came over, I don't feel like me getting rid of a gift they gave me would outweigh the kindness that I've shown them otherwise when it comes to hurting their feelings, right? They wouldn't be as hurt because they know how much I love them and care for them. Okay, the last rub of these internal feelings is, I don't think my taste is better than anyone else's. Listen, I think that's great that you don't think you're higher and mightier because of how you view style or taste or anything like that. Wonderful. Love that. But this goes for, like, let's say fashion. You can admire someone else's fashion and know that that's not your personal style, right? Like, those two things don't have to go together. You can admire it without wanting it for yourself, right? So you're not taking a posture of being better than someone by simply liking what you like. You're being yourself. So when we talk about that internal guilt here, you don't need to feel guilty as though you're insulting them, because ultimately what you like and what you use has absolutely nothing to do with them. So I just encourage you to let that piece go. Okay, on to the external pressures, which I know is the trickier one that maybe more of you are even here for, because you're like, what do I do when someone asks where the gift is that they gave me? So external pressure to keep gifts that are clutter really underscore a fear of what the person's reaction is going to be. And it will also exacerbate any of that guilt we just talked about, because you assume that their reaction is going to be really bad. And as a whole, this really could cause tension in a relationship. So this is kind of a big deal. Like I said at the beginning, you cannot declutter the item and also show them that you have it. That option doesn't exist. Okay. So, since this is a decluttering podcast and you also want to declutter, if you're listening, I'm assuming, then we are going to talk through here some scenarios that might happen if you do decide to declutter it and therefore don't have it to show them. We're not going to be talking through keeping it, other than to say that there's that photo album I talked about. That's an option. And then I did say on this on the last episode I did about what to do with gifts that are clutter. There's this idea that I think is kind of funny. I read about it in The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, which is a book by Margareta Magnusson. And she talks about keeping a chest of things that you don't like a storage tote or whatever that you take out when the person comes over. Or you don't take the tote out. You go in and you get the item that they gave you and you take it out and display it just for when they're there. Listen, that sounds like a lot of work to me, but it might be the solution that works best for you, especially for people that you don't see quite as often. Like if your in-laws visit a couple times a year. Like, I don't think that that's a really reasonable solution if you have people who come over a couple times a week. That would be like a lot of going in and out of this, things I don't want tote or chest. And I do want to point out that that really only works if you've highly decluttered your home. So one more tub of stuff in the closet is not a huge deal, rather than all of these items adding to an already messy and cluttered home. And you forget that you have the tote of items you don't want anyway, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So that approach really is if you've highly decluttered your house already. This approach also does make you really consider who is realistically coming back into your house, and only keep gifts that you don't like from those people, right? Versus like wedding gifts or gifts from friends who live far away, that kind of thing. It makes you realize I'm not going to keep this in a chest when they're probably never going to come to my house anyway, right? So it really does make you kind of consider realistically who you have to, quote, worry about. But let's dive into the 3 things that could happen if you declutter something and the person who gave it to you comes to your house. There are 3 things that could happen here. Number 1, you declutter it and you realize that your fear of them asking where it is was actually just in your head, and they never ask. This is more common than you might think it is. If you are someone who you haven't had somebody ask you yet where a gift is, you're just so afraid they're going to, please know that odds are they will never ask, okay? But I did talk about that in the last episode. We talked about this, and I want to actually get into number 2 and number 3 that could happen, which is number 2 is they ask where it is and you share honestly. By the way, I don't suggest pretending that you lost it or you broke it or whatever. I don't think lying is the answer. I never think lying is the answer. So when maybe they ask where it is, you share honestly, and they respond with understanding. They might still feel disappointed, but they are not mad or feel disrespected. Okay, that's number 2 that could happen. Number 3 is they ask where it is, you share honestly, and they get really mad at you. Those are the only 3 things that could happen. Okay, so now at least you're faced with reality, right? If you declutter something that was a gift, those are the 3 things that could happen. You declutter it and they never ask about it. You declutter it, and when they do ask about it and you tell them, they don't get mad. And number 3, same thing, but they do get mad. So how do we help things turn out to be more like number 2 instead of number 3, where they don't get mad at you? Remember, we cannot control other people, right? As a whole, we cannot. However, these are some ideas I have that might make it lean towards a better reaction from that person. First of all, have hard conversations with them outside of the moment. You do not have to tell them you decluttered an item like a confession. You don't have to go, build yourself your own doghouse. Okay, I'm not saying you should do that. But generally share about your desire to declutter your house and your why. Maybe it's decreasing stress or a healthier environment for your kids or more time to do what you love, right? Just share with them in general. Obviously, if there's someone who's coming to your house often and asking about a gift, there's someone you see often. So you can weave this into conversation about your desire to declutter your life and your house. If necessary, explicitly ask them moving forward that gifts be consumables or experiences, but lead that request with massive gratitude, right? Saying, thank you so much for how much you think of me. I love that you clearly give gifts as a form of love to me, to the kids, to whoever. It's been so wonderful. And I'm at the point that our home just doesn't have room for more. So, if you want to continue giving us gifts, which again, I'm so grateful for, if they could be more consumables like food or maybe memberships or experiences that would get us really excited, that would be amazing if you want to continue expressing yourself with gifts. Of course, no pressure. We don't expect any gifts, but I just wanted to share that with you and see if that would be possible, right? That's a kinder way of saying it than being like, stop giving gifts. We don't need all this stuff in the house. Gosh, like, why can't you just get it? Why don't you understand? Right? That's not going to go well. And the other thing here is that if you have had these types of conversations, they won't be so surprised if they do come over and ask about something specific that you have decluttered, right? They won't be surprised that you've decluttered it. And that takes away an element of the sting that they might feel. Again, they might still feel some type of way about it, but you've taken away at least one layer, which is the layer of surprise. Now, in that moment, if they ask where it is, something you can offer is true gratitude and an honest explanation. Not like, I didn't like it, or it was ugly or whatever. I'm not talking about that truth. What's that line from the Taylor Swift song? I love it so much. Casually cruel in the name of being honest. Casually cruel in the name of being honest, right? Ugh, like I hate that. So that's not what I'm talking about here, okay? I love the lyric, by the way. Hate the when that happens, right? When people are like, I'm just being honest. I'm like, it doesn't mean you have to be mean. Like, please protect my gentle soul. Jeez Louise. Anyway, so don't say I didn't like it, but maybe try, it meant so much to me that you bought it for me, but I found that I was not able to make use of it regularly, or I couldn't find a place for it in my home, or unfortunately it became part of this bigger problem of just too much stuff in the house, and I had to make the really hard choice of letting it go. But thank you so much, and know that I haven't forgotten about your generosity, right? Really gentle ways of being truthful. And this is where a gratitude photo album might come in handy if you want to show them that you took a picture to remember it, of what they gave you, and they're the one who gave it to you and when they gave it to you, and really show them that gratitude piece. It could be something as silly as like salt and pepper shakers or a coffee mug or whatever. You have a picture of it, but the point is that you're valuing their thoughtfulness and holding it dear in your heart. So if you have someone who in your life is really combative, and you're like, no matter how kind I am about it, they still get really upset about it, maybe try this gratitude photo album so they can see that you're still valuing the thought that they had to give it to you. If it was a more valuable item and you were able to sell it, you can share with them that you're so grateful because it was a gift that kept on giving. So you were excited for the times you did use it, but once you weren't using it regularly, you sold it and were able to get blank item that you now use and love. It does not have to be an exact exchange, right? Like maybe you sold, I don't know, a crock pot and you only got $20 for it or whatever. But you recently bought a new vacuum. You can tell the gifter, oh, thank you so much. Loved it for a little while. I realized I wasn't getting regular use out of it. And so I did sell it, but actually that money went towards this new vacuum that I really needed, right? Like it doesn't have to be an exact exchange. Just think of something that you recently got that you do use a lot and share that the money you got from selling that item went towards this new thing. And so it feels like they were part of gifting you that item. Okay, also to avoid an angry reaction, really consider what the item is. So if it's something that holds strong sentimental value to the other person, in that case, I wouldn't declutter it. I'd actually offer it back to them and say, I'm so sorry. I don't have space for this. And it meant so much that you wanted me to have it. I want it to be treasured. Is there someone else in the family that might have room for it? Do you have room for it? I just don't think it's something that is going to be well taken care of in my space right now, because I just don't have room for it other than maybe in the back of a closet. And it's more important than that, right? You're acknowledging that it is a sentimental value for them. Again, there's no perfect answer here. We're just trying to soften the blow, because if you're choosing decluttering over keeping, remember, those are your only two choices. You can't keep the item and not have the clutter if you consider it clutter, right? You just can't. So there is going to be a slight discomfort if they ask about it or if you return it, right? That discomfort is unavoidable. But what I'm offering up is maybe some language that you can use to soften the blow. So, having the conversations about decluttering your home in general is important. Like I said, sharing that with people you love so that they're not surprised and gently asking them to not continue that cycle, right? That's really important. We've also talked about expressing tremendous gratitude when explaining where it is, right? We have talked about being mindful about what the item is and returning it if it is important and not just decluttering it because that could upset someone way more if it held like strong sentimental value to them, right? We talked about all this, and you still might end up with the third possibility on your hands. Remember, there's only three things that can happen. They never ask about it, they ask about it and react well, and they ask about it and they get mad. Okay, so number three is they get mad. If they get mad, all you can do is remain calm and gracious. At this point, there's nothing you can do. If you've already done all the things that we talked about and tried all the different ideas, you have to know you are not in charge of how they manage their own disappointment in life, other than to do, like I said, all the things we talked about with being kind and thankful and respectful. I do believe that we have some impact on other people. I don't really like this idea that, like, oh, it's 100% on them if they get mad, right? Like they just need to figure that out. I'm not in charge of their emotions. Well, we do have some influence over the way other people feel based on how we deliver information, right? But it is true that if we do everything we possibly can to be mindful and gracious, we can't manage their disappointment for them. Listen, I personally do believe that relationships are more important than decluttering. I've said that on this podcast before. I think I first heard that phrase on the Minimalish podcast, that relationships are more important than decluttering. So, do I think that you should cut someone out of your life because you get in a fight over the stuff that you've decluttered? No. If that happens, there's a lot more going on in the relationship than someone like me can help with. Okay. That likely requires like help from a therapist or just someone who can get to the root of that dynamic if it gets to the point that you're that heated over the personal decision to declutter, right? I will say that for the most part, when people get mad over something like this, it will blow over. I know that doesn't sound fun. And again, you don't really have a choice here. Either you declutter it or you keep it. And then you just do everything you can for the reaction to be good if they do ask about it. Reminder, they're probably not even going to ask about it. But if they do get mad, especially like I said, if you're incredibly kind and gracious with your response, this whole situation is going to blow over sooner than later. And remember this, getting defensive does not help. Justifying your choice does not help. If I've learned anything from working for a therapist, like I mentioned, I work for Dr. Tracy on her social media team. I've shared that on here before. She came on. She's the couples therapist I talk about who came on for episode 17 of this podcast. I love her so dearly. But if there's anything I've learned from working for her, even though I am not one, reminder, I am not a therapist, but I've learned that justifying our choices creates a further divide in that relationship instead of getting you on the same page or getting them to understand. We think if we try to explain it to them or we defend our decision to declutter it, that hopefully it'll help them get it. It'll help them understand and they won't be as mad. But realistically, justifying it really doesn't help. It furthers the divide by putting you on two different teams. So a better way of moving forward is just to validate whatever they're saying and feeling. Okay. So this is not accepting inappropriate behavior or emotional or verbal abuse, of course. Rather, instead, it's just validating their personal experience if they're struggling with disappointment or anger about you decluttering an object. So this might sound like, I know it might feel like your money was wasted. And I want you to know that it wasn't because of how much your gift helped me feel loved and thought of. Okay. Or if they are just feeling really hurt, you can say, I'm hearing how much this hurts you. I know that it's because you wanted us to treasure that item. And I want you to know that I treasure you and our relationship even without that item. Okay. You're validating them. You're saying, I get it. It hurts. And I love you. This also might sound like you thought that item was really great and you think I'm insulting your taste. You're repeating back to them what they're feeling if they've said it explicitly. Don't make assumptions about what someone else is feeling. Not saying that. But if they're like, you just think you're better than me, or why don't you understand that that was so beautiful, or gosh, you just think I am so whatever, right? Like they clearly think that you're insulting their taste, right? You say, You thought that item was really great and you think I'm insulting your taste, and I want you to know that's not true. Your preferences are part of what makes you you, and I'm so glad you're who you are, right? So all you can do is validate. Don't justify, don't defend, don't say, I just have to think about myself. I just need to get things out of the house. I'm so stressed out. You shouldn't have given it to me in the first place. You look at my house. Can't you see that that doesn't match my decor, or I don't like that? Or why would you spend that much money in the first place? Or like, I'm not getting rid of it because I'm wasting your money. I had to get rid of it because X, Y, and Z, right? All these defenses and justifications are not actually going to help. So instead, really try that validation piece. It's not saying that you're sorry you decluttered it. You're not apologizing for something that you're not sorry for. You're just saying, I want you to know that what you're feeling is understandable, and you're offering something of gratitude or encouragement by saying your preferences are what makes you you. I know that you wanted us to treasure it, and thank you so much for giving it to us, and I treasure you, right? These are all just really kind things we can say. Okay, so once you've validated their feelings and reassured them the best you can, you do not need to do anything else. You've reached the end of the road here. You don't have to make it up to them somehow. Let time do its thing. And usually things will end up okay if you haven't escalated the situation through defensiveness, justification, blame, any of those things, right? You've done all you can. And it is at this point that you, like I said, are not in charge of someone else's feelings and managing them. You've managed them the best you can. The part that you play in this, you've done to the best of your ability. And sometimes then you just have to let the awkwardness or the frustration or the anger run its course, and it's going to be okay. Again, I wish I had the silver bullet here, but hopefully what I shared today can be helpful as you navigate this really tricky experience of decluttering gifts. If you struggle with it because of those internal pressures you put on yourself, that strong guilt, I really hope that those first points we talked about can give you some ideas and new mindsets that will mitigate some of that guilt. If you struggle with the fear or the repercussions in your relationships, I hope these conversation ideas and strategies serve useful. And at the end of the day, just remember life is sticky. We cannot avoid that. So we must make hard choices to do what aligns best with our needs and our wants. So if living in a decluttered home will decrease your stress and your housework, it will benefit your mental and physical well-being, if it will free up your energy and your creativity and your gratitude, if it will allow all of that to take hold in life, then that is something that is a need and want for you. And you have to make hard choices to align with whatever's most important to you. So if that's the goal for you to have in your home, push through these hard parts and you will get there. I promise. Thank you so much for being here today. Next week, we have author and professional organizer Jenny Albertini on the podcast. She literally trained under Marie Kondo herself, like in person with Marie. So excited. Her insight is so good. We're going to talk about decluttering in a holistic and mindful manner, kind of what we talked about today with relationships and just really being mindful about how it can affect our lives on every level. So I will see you next week. You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.